You have the opportunity to tackle resentment head on and learn how to have respectful and bold conversations to cut through the BS, which is belief systems, to cut through that to get to the true core of what's happening so that we can address resentment before it takes root. It's an absolute must. Leaders, welcome to the Leadership Sandbox. I am Tammy J, your host of the Leadership Sandbox. And this week, we're going to be talking about what to do when resentment is building in your team. We're starting this year out with some powerful content because here's the bottom line. Resentment is like a silent virus in your team, and it doesn't just stay quiet. It spreads and it festers and it costs more than you may think. So when we don't address resentment that's building and budding in our teams, we're actually costing our company and our performance outcomes, potentially customers and clients, a great deal on the other side. And the reason that we address this up front, the resentment, we want to get ahead of it because it's critical for your workplace success. It's critical for your team's future. There are staggering statistics that I can share with you, and I will share with you, like one example. Teams with unresolved conflict or resentment see productivity decrease by up to 70%. 70%. Can you afford that? I don't know, but we're going to dive into that in the sandbox today. So kick off your shoes and step on in, and let's get started in 3, 2, 1, now. Hey, leader, if you're navigating tough conversations and it feels like a struggle, I want you to know I've got you covered. I've got you back. I've created a communication starter pack designed to give leaders and managers the tools that they need to communicate with confidence, clarity, and real impact. So I want you to head on over to bondgroupenterprises.com and grab your starter pack today. It's time to lead conversations that matter and get the results you deserve. All right, welcome in. We're talking about some staggering statistics, right? Resentment costs businesses a great deal. Employees experiencing resentment are 4 times more likely to disengage and 2 times more likely to leave their job within the next year. And that is a direct report from 2023 out of Work Institute and their 2023 retention report. That's huge. And here's the other one. Workplace conflicts cost U.S. businesses an estimated $359 billion with a B annually in lost time and lost productivity. And that comes out of the CPP Global report on workplace conflict. So if you have an extra few $1 billion lying around that you want to just throw at this problem, then sure, don't address it. You're good. If you just, if you're okay with going and having turnover and the expense of that to your team, to your work environment, we talked about it last week that it's 100 to 213% of cost of salary to replace one person. Think about that. So if you're paying somebody $150,000 and they've got resentment and you've got to replace them because they leave because they're resentful because you as a leader don't follow through with your word, or because you've got a toxic work environment, or because we don't treat each other with respect, or because worse, even just as bad, they don't understand their trajectory and their path forward. Can you afford a 213 or 150% cost to replace them on that $150,000 salary? That's huge. Okay, you get my point. Who are you not to get in and fix these problems? But let's understand resentment in teams first, because before we can even get into solving it, you got to have an understanding of it. So resentment can be a mix of anger, of frustration, and unspoken grievances. When we don't give our teams the time to talk about maybe what's frustrating them, or we shut down. I've seen this happen before, and I probably shared it here in the sandbox, but I worked with a CEO several years ago of a very highly prominent, successful international brand. And I worked with their leadership team for several years. And this CEO did not like conflict. And I go to have an executive training session or executive planning session with the team. And we're getting into defining who we want to be known, seen, and celebrated for. And he's just like, I've got people on this team that don't get along, and they know they have to leave it outside of my meetings. I don't want to deal with it. I just don't handle conflict well. And I'm like, okay, cool. Is that how you still want to be? Like at the end of this session, do you want to be known as the CEO who still avoids conflict? And he says, I'm really okay with it, Tammy. I'm like, okay. He's like, I've gotten here for 62 years. I'm okay with that. But I know that it's probably not what you want me to say. And I said, no, it's not. So I ended up having him in this. We had all of the executives, the management team in a room at a retreat, sitting at these round tables, and he sat right next to me. And I'm standing up front. He sat in the closest seat he could sit next to me. And he came up to me after the first break of the first day, and he says, I'm really uncomfortable with this. And I said, I know. We're getting into some already right up front, some really good stuff. And he goes, yeah, but I don't like it. And I said, okay, so do you want to leave? Because your team wants to have these conversations. And he says, no, I don't want to leave. I said, great. Do you trust me? He says, I do. I said, okay, trust that I will keep you protected. We will get to the core root of this issue. And we will also, by the end of our 3 days together, have a plan of how we're going to be different with each other. Are you in for that? He said, yes. The rest of the week went great. And he came around, but he was super uneasy, and he would check every break. We would check in. I said, you just check in with me. We're good. You check in with me, Terry. We're good. And we did. And we got through it. Why am I bringing that story up? Because the resentment from the teams, because he didn't like to handle conflict, was building. And they were having these highly paid executives erupting in the workplace, completely inappropriate. But that was just because he wouldn't address the core issues as the CEO that they wanted and needed. It was frustrating for them. There were unspoken grievances, and there was a lot of anger that was building. When we got through that and dug that up, they had no problems at all. I mean, they shouldn't say they had no problems. Their problems shifted, and they could actually focus on the business results that they wanted to produce versus the person and personality issues that they were having at a behavior level. So this is how resentment starts. Perceived unfairness, right? When you have one team member that has maybe uneven workloads, showing favoritism, that can cripple a team very quickly. Lack of communication or transparency, and unresolved conflicts or habitual avoidance of hard conversations. Go back to the CEO of this top brand. He didn't want to have hard conversations. He avoided them. The team needed to have them. They also needed his direction. Once he got comfortable with, okay, I'm safe when I have these, because we put boundaries around how we were going to have those hard conversations, made him feel more comfortable. And we were actually able to dig up the things that were underneath the surface, so it stopped swelling and getting worse, right? So let's talk about the signs of resentment building. Passive aggressive behaviors, increase in gossip and rumors, and resistance to new initiatives, and disengagement from the current project flows that we have. When you have high performers or just regular performers on your team, people that are committed to the mission and vision and values that you've placed before them, that they've come into the company, they want to know that they're working with like-minded people, not going in to be silently saboteured by a passive aggressive individual, not to go in and have gossip and Glenn the gossip show up around every corner all the time. And they're wondering, are they talking about me? Or are they not? I'm doing my job. I know I am, but are you doing your job? And all those conversations that happen. When there is a resistance to new initiatives and change, that means you've probably got some resentment building, and you want to get underneath that. So let's talk about the leadership role. I'm going to go back to resentment. Great one to start with. I want you to acknowledge that resentment often stems from leadership's actions, or more importantly, your inaction, friend. It's important that you, as the leader of the team, or you as the manager of the team, take ownership of team dynamics. I see this happening with a current team that I know rather well. And there are some interesting team dynamics, but the leader of the team isn't taking ownership of the dynamics that are being present. And so they're continually festering to the top, which is causing other people on the team to grow in their frustration and their disengagement. Also causing them to be using time at work to look for other JOBs, because They don't want to work for that leader who's not taking ownership of the dynamics that they're part of creating. And unfortunately, this environment likes to move people around. So the one leader that's causing the most significant challenges by not taking ownership will probably be moved. We were just alerted to a different team, which is not the solution, friend, not the solution to just move your problem children around. So let's talk about how we identify and address these resentment issues. You want to conduct a one-on-one check-in and surface any hidden frustrations. You want to give people the opportunity to share their feedback, to give the opportunity to talk about what the resentment is. If you notice it happening with one or a group of people, bringing in an outsider, I love going into those conversations. They're some of my favorite because I'll help to uncover quickly what's going on with a team when that resentment has really settled in. I did this with a group out in California a few years ago, actually, and some pretty significant resentment settled in. And I had the opportunity to go in and not only expose it, but then say, so how's that serving you to have that resentment and to hold on to it? And is that how you want to finish out your career? Now, we did have one person that said, you know what, I'm 4 years from retirement. I'm good. I'm not going to change. Okay, well, that's an interesting thought. But then the others were like, no, we don't want that. We don't want to feel that way. So we were actually able to do it in a team and then pull the one individual aside. And then we worked a plan to kind of sideline them. They still had their same workload, but they weren't infecting the team any longer because they understood that their infection of the team with their resentment was actually worse. And they didn't want to be that. They didn't want to be known for that. So we created a workaround and it worked okay for that environment. And there are certain environments that can work in and some that it absolutely won't work in. And I want you to also watch for nonverbal cues in meetings and with different interactions with people. That's where some of those silent saboteurs and those negative Nellies really show up, is in the nonverbal cues, the body language cues. That's going to help you to know if there's resentment building. But the bottom line with this is wherever it's at, I want for you to actually have a conversation about it with the team so that you are digging up anything that could be hidden under the surface. And here are some of those strategies I was telling you about to address and prevent the resentment. Identifying the root cause, key. Acknowledging and validating feelings. Okay. I know I talk all the time about identifying root cause, getting underneath it. Be specific. I noticed, here's the tension. I'm wondering what we want to do about it. Can we discuss it? Cool. Let's do that. Be upfront. Love it. Though when someone comes to you and they're feeling the feels of it, I want you to acknowledge, I can see that this is a frustration for you. I acknowledge that you have some feelings around this, and I'm wondering what you would like to, or how you would like to proceed. Would you like to take 24 hours to calm down with your feelings, like to bring calm to you so that we can address this for solution? Or are you ready to dive into this now? Because I understand that you feel that this situation might seem unfair. Let's talk about it. I can address it that way and acknowledge and validate their feelings, right? And then you want to create a collaborative resolution plan. So you want to empower team members to have these conversations together. But then I also want you to ask this question: what would make this process feel more equitable to you? And I want to ask everybody that question. So they're all feeling, because you're going to have the people like me that want to be able to talk about it, and that I'll use need intentionally. There is a need to be able to talk about it. Then you're going to have others that have a need to process it. So honoring both sides of that, so we don't paralyze or polarize. We want to allow both sides to have their moment of dialogue and processing. And maybe the people that want to we dialogue while the processors leave the room so we don't overwhelm them and cause them to shut down. And then the processors can come in without the people who want to be the over talkers or talking a lot or expressing outwardly. And then the processors can share, because you've given them a format of what would it look like and how would this process make it more equitable for you. Give them the chance to dialogue about that in their way. It's actually a huge game changer for you when it comes to this. And that follow up, I'm all about follow up, follow up, follow up, follow up. It's like I should have the shirt, follow up. Please just revisit any agreements that are made, all agreements that are made. Please make sure you make agreements on what our progress is and what it will look like and how it will feel when we get there. Great coaching conversations are really about, so what will be different for you when you achieve this? And how will that make you feel? And what will you see in your work-life balance? Or what will you see in the office when this is different? And what will that bring you? Get your team to get so attached to the outcome that they say that they want. It becomes the strongest, most dominant picture. And it's what they're moving toward every single day. And that follow up and in those conversations, it builds that. But it also does one more thing. Your fifth step, which is building trust. That's how we prevent resentment from happening. When people feel that they have a place that they can communicate, that they can talk, they're getting to the core of the why, what's important, what it looks like, how they're going to feel, and what's going to be different as a result of it. And they see you modeling that behavior too, leader. Guess what? Resentment starts to go. You're cultivating a culture at that point of transparent communication and mutual respect, which at the end of the day, at the start of the day, and in the middle of the day, that is what everybody comes to work wanting and hoping for. When you have new people that are coming on your team, they're not hoping they're coming into a team filled with resentment. They're hoping they're coming into a team that transparent and communicates transparently with mutual respect, that they're in a culture that's healthy and thriving, not one that's laden with resentment. Think about that. If you're bringing people into an environment where there's a lot of resentment, you are shooting yourself in the foot right out of the gate. The cost of resentment isn't just a people problem. It's a productivity and profitability problem. Remember that. You have the opportunity to tackle resentment head on if you choose to, just like that CEO I was telling you about. You might need somebody like me coming in to stand with you as we tackle it, so you build up your comfort level and your skill set to address it versus slithering, shrinking away because you don't know how to. And learn how to have respectful and bold conversations to cut through the BS, which is belief systems, to cut through that to get to the true core of what's happening so that we can address resentment before it takes root. It's an absolute must. So in your sandbox, in your workplace, resentment can either ruin your castle or be the catalyst for building a stronger foundation. And what you do next, leader, is up to you. So I want you to take a minute today, and I want you to write out your thoughts about resentment and write out what your first action step is as a result of what you've learned here in the sandbox. Because I know, and I say it every week, leadership is not something you're born with. It's something that you grow into. And I want to thank you for taking time to grow into your next level of leadership in the sandbox today. And we have a great resource coming your way on the 5 questions that you can ask to uncover resentment in your team. You're going to want to check it out. It's in the show notes. You can also go to bondgroupenterprises.com to find your way of getting a hold of the 5 questions to uncover resentment in your team. We'll see you next time in the sandbox. Make it a great day.